together with Executive Office, Futures and Signals Strategy team. As we laid out in the preparation for the workshop, today our key objective will be to surface the signals that we've been detected, that have been emerging from the future trends and signal system pretty much over the last year, and revealing patterns that are related to governance and justice specifically, and reflect on how these insights may help us as a collective to make more future-proof, more future-informed decisions. One of the key objectives is, of course, to arrive at a shared understanding, but also to really see to what extent these issues that are emerging from our global system really resonate with your local and national experiences. It is really to strengthen our collective understanding, and as a result of which to ensure that the upcoming 2024 trends report is stronger and more reflective of ground realities. Without further ado, I would like to hand over to EXO Coordination Specialist, Darah Aljoudar, who is with us and will walk us through the methodology for this exercise. Over to you, Darah.
Right, thank you so much, Ezgi, and it's really great to see so many familiar names on the screen. We're excited to have this session with you and really to gain insights from your expertise and perspectives. So today we'll be spending the next 2 hours together diving into some issues, signals, and trends on governance. I'm going to share my screen here, and I will ask Ezgi to please copy the Miro board link to the chat. And please don't be frightened by Miro. If you're uncomfortable with it, you can always just use the Zoom chat and we'll have someone paste your comments or anything into the Miro board. But for right now, to start, we would like to ask you to just write your name on a sticky, your name and your office. So just double click the sticky note and type in a name and your office, and then just drag your location, drag a pin into the map, just so that we see where people are at. And that also helps maybe get you into Miro. But if you cannot access it or you're uncomfortable, just put it in the Zoom chat, and one of our Futures Fellows, Soha or Federico, will enter your info into the Miro board. So it's nice to see people from all around the globe. So I'll move on to while you do that, just speak about the objectives again for people that are just joining now. We're really here to get a sense of what are the key trends and issues that we think will impact the governance space in the coming 5 to 10 years, and really to uncover our blind spots and ensure that we aren't missing anything important. We'll do that by this is the agenda for today. We'll spend the first 10-15 minutes in the introduction, also trying to get your mind into the future, into 2035, and do a small exercise there. And then we will dive into trends and issues on governance. We'll hear from our governance colleagues on the top global trends. So we have Julia Kercher from the Oslo Governance Center, who will present on the key trends that they are keeping an eye on. And then our team, the Futures Fellows, will be Soha Rashid and Federico will be presenting some of the emerging issues that they've spotted that have come through the future trends and signal system. And I'll speak to what that is in a minute. And then the third segment of the workshop, we'll go into breakout groups to really hear from you what you think. We really want you to challenge these issues, to bring in your perspective, and to share with us if you think something is missing, or how you think this will impact development, or if you see this will likely turn into a trend that will impact our work in the development space. So, and then finally reporting back and synthesis. So with that, I just wanted to share some rules of the game for the workshop. Again, it's really hard sometimes when we're already started our working day. We're thinking about the challenges of today, but we're really asking you for the next 2 hours to put your imagination hats on, go to the future, and remember futures thinking, strategic foresight, it's not a perfect science, right? There's no right or wrong. And we really want to hear your perspectives, your views, your expertise, just so that we can imagine a collective future. And with this, come in with judgment-free, open minds. Anything is possible. And just think about the what ifs as opposed to this could never happen. And then finally, we really encourage disagreements here. Please bring in, bring in your perspectives. We don't want you to be shy. We really want you to challenge us. And if you see things that are different than what's being talked about in the session, please do speak up, because that's the value of this exercise, is to hear from the different perspectives. So I'm going to, before I hand over to Federico to take us to 2035, and then before we speak, before Julia speaks about the trends that they're seeing in the governance team, I want to explain one of the reasons we're doing this exercise, which is to contribute to the 2024 trends report. And this is something new our team is doing. It's going to be published early next year, towards the end of January, I hope, or early to mid-January. And it's going to be a watch list of the top trends that should be on everybody's radar in 2024. And this can help your offices in work planning, advocacy, implementation. It'll also help our team as we work on the midterm review of the current strategic plan, which will be sent to discussed in the executive board in June of next year. And this is really a report that is meant to be written for UNDP and shaped by UNDP, and will draw on from these workshops. So this is one of the many workshops that we're holding. We're doing them on all the signature solutions and some of the enablers. And it also this trends report draws from the future trends and signals system, which I'll share the link to in the chat, or you can also just click on this little arrow if you're on the Miro board. It will take you to the system. So this is a system that our team has developed with the BPPS integration team to really help capture the major signals of change in related to development, right? So we have 200 volunteer scanners. Some of the scanners are in the room here, and it's meant to activate UNDP's sensing capacity. And right now we have more than 1,000 signals in the system, and these are all about 1,087. And these are signals that might not make the news, but we think might be interesting for development. So, for example, it's a small little tiny virus that is emerging from a town in China, right? That then emerges to become a global pandemic, right? It's a small protest in front of a European Parliament that then becomes a global youth climate movement, right? So it's these small little signals that we're trying to capture that, not necessarily quantitative data. Sometimes it's just a conversation with a taxi driver or a street vendor that indicate that there might be some change coming. So this is the UNDP Future Trends and Signals System. You'll hear it referred to during this workshop, and you know, we're hoping to use the signals that people are entering to inform the workshop, for you to also challenge some of the signals and see if they're relevant or resonate in your context. So with that, I want to hand over to our Futures Fellow, Federico Vaz, who's based in Uruguay. He's a public sector innovation expert, and we're really happy to have him as a Futures Fellow with our team, and he'll guide us through the next exercise. Federico.
Thank you, Darah, so much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. So we're going to start off by trying to put on our future thinking hat to see if we can immerse ourselves in this future thinking. So the first activity that we're going to do today is called Headlines from the Future, or News from the Future. And essentially, what I'm going to ask you to do now is just to close your eyes for a few seconds and put yourself in future mode. Try to transport yourself to 2035. It's not that far away anymore. And try to think about what news would you like to see, or what news you could see happening in 2035. So we're going to use the posters, the sticky notes that we have down there in colors. Hopefully you are able to see that directly on the mirror board. Otherwise, we can help you navigate it and write them for you. But essentially, we would like you to start thinking in future terms and write some of the headlines from this future news. So imagine this possible future in 2035 and think of the news which are related to governance that you will be able to see, perhaps on a monthly development magazine, on just your regular newspaper, or even maybe a tweet or an X or whatever it's going to be called in 2035. But in essence, we would like to see your headlines. So what are the things that you could think could happen in 2035 and would make the news, especially regarding governance? And we have a few there that I can read for you to have an idea. So for instance, women in most parliaments make up more than 40% of members. Indigenous non-binary person elected Secretary General of the United Nations for the first time. These are just some that could spark your imagination. But in principle, again, trying to think 2035, trying to think future. What are the news related to governance that you might see then? And we're going to use about 5 minutes for this exercise. Sounds good?
Thanks, Federico.
Sure. And I'm going to read a few that we have here. For instance, transition from fossil fuel economy brings about new opportunities for local communities. That's a good one. Thanks. And again, if you're more comfortable just writing them down on the chat, we can move them onto the review. We have another one, very interesting. Morocco builds defense wall to keep out European climate refugees. It's a new headline from 2035. Wow, this is brilliant. 80% of Americans let their AI assistant vote for them. The one here, global parliament passes universal basic income. So it's not only about universal basic income, but we also have a global parliament. Some very good news over here. A bright future in 2035. Rule of law rules all the countries around the globe. And we have about 2 more minutes.
Sorry, yeah, does anyone want to speak to any of these shocking, surprising, interesting to you? I really like the batteries built from seawater. Lithium declared worthless. That's a...
It's interesting for me to see that there's 3 or 4 that are quite similar. All around, you know, global parliament, planetary level legal system, a rule of law for all countries. You know, there's sort of quite a similar theme there in terms of planetary level governance system becoming enforced.
We have about 1 more minute to go.
AI elected as a city mayor.
Fantastic. And we have SDG 16 targets reached. Wouldn't that be amazing?
I'm liking the ones in the chat as well. Revolutions for freedom and democracy in the Arab region. It is now the norm for AIs to fact check every statement made during a political campaign.
Fantastic. I'm copying that one, Mariana. Thank you.
Did Darah or was okay? Now it's gone. I did see something on the screen, but it's gone now.
Sorry, that was me. Yeah.
I think we're about time, so we perhaps should be wrapping up this. Thank you so much, everyone, for your contribution. These are amazing. We have a few more that we would like to go into more detail when we have the chance.
Yeah, I mean, this board is open, so feel free to keep coming back to this if you're inspired to think of more news. These are really fascinating, and it's nice to see how imaginative we can get. Now, with that, I'm going to pass it over to Julia from our Oslo Governance Center to present the key trends that the governance team has been keeping an eye on.
Thanks, Darah. And let me pull up my slide. Here we go. Can you see it full screen?
We can see the slide, it's not at full screen yet, but we can see it fine.
Yeah, remind me, where do I find it? So, yeah, here we go. That should be it. Display settings. There we go. Hi, everyone, colleagues. Great to see so many of you here. The numbers are keep popping up, keep rising. We're really excited about this this workshop, and I'm presenting the trends that we've summarized for Sarah, who was called away today, our governance team leader. And we really like the logic of this workshop, which is to for the futures team in the executive office to ask us, and they've asked all the other signature solutions as well, and the enabler teams to present the trends that we see. And then they'll throw at us the emerging trends and signals that they've seen to stress test our trends. So we really like this idea. And so the trends that I'll present now, you'll see they won't be surprising to any of you. All of us working on governance in UNDP and beyond, our partners would know them as well. And we've clustered them. So there are only 5, but you'll see there are many subtopics in them. So for the trends report, we'll see how they will be presented. So you'll see here, the first one, not surprising, democratic backsliding and shrinking civic space. At the extreme end, of course, we know this includes actually recently even a significant increase in the targeting and killing of human rights defenders and journalists. But it goes all the way down to including things like liberal backlash, or some refer to it, includes gender backlash. So even within society, polarization and extreme views on liberal views, and the also decreasing trust in political institutions. So there are a number of sort of sub-trends in there, but that's the whole kind of tension and dynamic between institutions and citizens, and that tension becoming more tense. There's something in there that we can see. A lot of this is, of course, reflected in our SDG 16 report that came out recently, the International IDEA Global State of Democracy report, and others that have come out recently. But it's a trend that has been around for years, as you all know. There are some signs that there's also a reaction to this. So a wave of demonstrations and sort of protest politics. So International IDEA, for example, sees people's participation as one of the big hopes for democracy. So that's the first big one. The second one, of course, is that violence is on the rise. So, for example, the fatalities from armed conflicts has, and I guess none of us are surprised, increased more than 50% from last year. That's kind of just startling to just see that number next to it. And the nature of conflicts is also changing and evolving. So, for example, we have polarizing geopolitics. Some talk about a new Cold War. There are, just over the past year, actually, more and more what people refer to as politically contested areas. So a lot of coups, Niger, Gabon, Haiti, very fragile situations where the actual authorities are not even clear, and who's in charge and who holds power in the country. That's another big trend. A third one is around justice. So over the years, I think we've all seen that there's been notable declines in judicial independence in every region of the world, very much also in Europe and the US, but all regions. But it's interesting to see that, for example, International IDEA also sees a slight counter trend, which is that courts and other accountability institutions are also stepping in to check power concentration. And there are a few examples in across regions as well. So that's kind of maybe a positive and a negative trend. So you see that's a second trend already, where there may be a bit of a counter trend to it. Then, of course, we have digital. And Sarah especially likes to frame it in a way that describes it as an age which has been perhaps the last 10, 15, maybe even 20 years, where it's about digitalizing governance, so making governance services available digitally, accessible digitally, but now to digital and including AI, especially over the past year, becoming so strong that the question becomes more, how do we govern digitalization and artificial intelligence rather than just using it for governance? So that's a trend that may be changing at the moment. And then we've got a trend that's already, again, like at least 5 to 10 years old probably, which is a growing call for climate justice and environmental governance. I remember about 10 years ago, I was like excitedly noting down the first litigation cases in the US and the Netherlands of youth taking their governments to court on the basis of human rights and the rights of future generations, for climate change especially. But that's not singles anymore. That's really a trend now. We see that in across regions. There's large business and human rights debates, also in the context of green transitions, and the idea of global common goods is also gaining ground. So again, there's a number of sub-trends in this one, but that's like, let's say, green justice, climate justice in that bubble. And Darah, I would leave it at this. We can talk more about, and I think there's space now also to add to those, but be aware that oh, I think there's a mic open, that these are clusters of trends. We could break them down into at least twice as many, and we're happy, actually. It would be nice perhaps after this workshop to spell them out a little bit more, and also complement them with the knowledge that we're going to gain today. But that's just an overview to just pin a few on the wall to get us started. So that's the trends that we saw. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Julia. And we do have a little bit of time, but before Soha and Federico present, maybe just a minute. If anyone wants to come in and share, our, these are really established trends, but do you see any of these in your context? Do you feel like there's an angle that's missing or something like that? Feel free to come in now. We can also do that towards the end. But Alexandra, please go ahead and introduce yourself as well, please.
Sorry, I was just looking for the buttons. I'm not usually on Zoom. I'm usually on Teams. Thanks so much, and great to get us to kickstart us, Julia. I think this process is really fascinating. I'm really excited to be part of this workshop. This juxtaposing the signals with the trends is really fascinating, with very unique methodologies. And just to start off, I think we should, really appreciate how privileged we are that we have governance trend data, right? I mean, governance is an area where we've really lacked kind of time series, cross-country, global data to even be able to pinpoint what is going on and to really have an understanding of the sort of prevalence and the scale and the scope. And there's new emerging areas that Julia touched on that are kind of embedded sort of subtopics within these broader trends. we're only recently having data come on stream. And I'm thinking in particular about trust in public institutions, which is, a really big issue. We had a good understanding of it in the OECD member states, and certainly less kind of data around, populations in Africa and other regions, their perceptions and experiences with the state. And I think what's really interesting from a kind of a democratic backsliding point of view is also to look across public institutions. There's lower trust in the political system, in political institutions, the parliament, political parties, political actors, with the sort of view that they don't represent us, they're corrupt, my views aren't important. And then the sort of trust in the state's ability to deliver, and for governments to kind of be able to manage and navigate all of these, crises and these expectations of citizens. And then, as Pedro in our Human Development Report Office, this trust between people, and the sort of feelings of insecurity and distrust within society. So the whole aspect of social cohesion. So this is all kind of looming large, and we've got really interesting data to be able to see the trends. Just one more point, which I find really interesting around the pushback, and we saw it in the gender trends and signals session last week, was this sort of conservatism. This conservatism also that's kind of being packaged in a neo-colonialism narrative too, around sort of these, the kind of the degrading of established norms around gender equality, but around a whole lot of other issues. So these sort of narratives that are both sort of perceived but also real are really kind of like a cloud, or kind of covering a lot of these sort of broader trends, particularly around the backsliding and the sort of the rights issues generally. So yeah, really excited for the workshop and to hear from colleagues in the regions how these global trends resonate. Over.
Great, thank you, Alexandra. I'm not sure if you mentioned this in the beginning, but Alexandra is from the governance team, the global governance team. And Yassine?
Thanks. My name is Yassine Janjua. I'm economist with United Nations Development Program Country Office in Mongolia, working as international economist. So for the AI, we have not really thought much about and has not done a lot of work. Just a couple of, over the last 2-3 days, I've watched, for instance, a video in which I think a French company, they have a robotic CEO, which is fully, they say, AI driven, making the strategy and using the data to make decisions. Though they say it's more kind of just kind of symbolic at this point, but to show that robot and, but what the future has, maybe more and more controlled by AI. And so I added some of the, notes up there. And another thing, for example, this thing that you have mentioned here, that AI detected sweatshops and digital, these kind of things, criminal use. So, and reflecting on this movie, Mission Impossible, I think that was the one in which they had this thing going on. So AI can shut down maybe the systems as well, certainly. And, the future will, doesn't matter how strong AI becomes on one hand, but just yesterday, Google has released a paper saying that they, have broken into the AI, and just one word let AI to reveal all the training data. They just gave one interesting command. They said, keep repeating the word poem. That's all. And the system just started repeating poem, 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 and then got confused and started revealing all the training data they had. It's so interesting. And these are I think, very important signals. that we need to consider.
Great, that's very interesting. Thank you so much, Yassine, for bringing those to the conversation. We'll have time to dig into everything that you just said, and Alexandra as well, and more. I'm going to hand it over to Soha Rashid, who is also another Futures Fellow in our team. She's a futurist based in Finland, originally from Egypt. Soha, go ahead and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Darah, and hello, everyone. So first, before we start talking about the emerging issues, we're going to talk about how we reached at them. So what we did is we took a look at all of the signals in the system, not all of them, but all of them related to governance. So we filtered by governance and by SDG 16, which is something you can do in the system. And governance is one of the topics that has the most signals in the system. We had 300 plus. So it shows us a bit of the mess that you have here on the left side. And then we try to make sense out of this huge pile of data. So me and Federico, we each started to look at it separately and to do the sense making on our own. And we end up with clusters of issues that we could see or identify from the 300 signals. And to come up with these 9, we basically thought, okay, what are the things that we have in common and that we find many signals of that we could discuss and bring here to the table today. So if you can zoom in a bit, Darah. So the first emerging issue we found here is about leadership. Alexandra talked about like trust in organizations and institutions. So here we look at what are the signals related to how public institutions of the futures would look like. And we found signals like the Prime Minister of Lesotho not taking a salary, giving up his salary, or a signal like a role that could be needed in every city in the future, which is a chief heat officer, or having a head of uncertainty, because is this a new role that could be needed? What are the traits as well of these leaders that we will need? So this is something the group that will have this emerging issue will be talking about. The second one we found was about mental health. So given that the world is now facing a mental health pandemic, and it's and more and more younger generations are finding it hard to cope and function. So what are the signals that we find there? We find a trend about well-being language, how that impacts the youth. We found an increase in mental health startups like that in the Arab region. A shift in understanding regarding kindness, that kindness does not mean that you're not successful. Kindness can actually boost your success. Another emerging issue we found was regarding demographic shifts and the aging population. So how are we going to govern that? What are we going to do with the workforce? So in Japan, for example, the toddler workforce was now used in elderly homes. The Chilean labor market started to educate the elderly people so that they can join the labor market. And in China, there's a university now for the elderly. So what are we doing to address the increase in lifespan and health span? Yes, Igor, this is exactly what we're looking for and what we will be discussing more and more. What other roles are needed and how will the structure change? The last one I will be talking before handing over to before I hand over to Federico is regarding gender, and it's about regulating women's bodies. So again, back to this whole conservatism issue regarding gender. This one is a bit strange because not only are now women's bodies being regulated while they're alive, but they're being regulated while they're dead. So on one hand, we find that menstrual tracking apps are sharing data with law enforcement, and this can have to do with abortion. So that's one thing. But there was a scientist who suggested that brain dead women could be used as surrogates. And then in Pakistan, they started padlocking graves of women so that the deceased women are not raped. So it's a bit too much info, but yeah, these are the kinds of issues that we're facing in regards to regulating women's bodies. So now I hand over to Federico.
Thank you so much, Soha, for that. So a few more trends that we managed to pick up, or patterns that we managed to pick up from these 300 plus signals. So the first pattern that I'm going to be presenting today is New World Order and multilateralism. So we've got a few signals in here showing how there is a global shift in terms of geopolitical order. We have some, and this also has an impact in multilateralism as well. So the first signal that we got here to show you today is, says India PM says UN has failed to deal with major global issues. So in a way, there's a backlash in terms of how the UN has been, or how successful the UN has been in dealing with some of the major issues that we face as a global community. Also, how China is emerging as a broker of peace in the Middle East, especially when it came to, well, earlier this year with Saudi Arabia and Iran, right? And they managed to negotiate the kickoff of those peace conversations. Similarly, we have the BRICS expansion that obviously all of you are well aware that is potentially going to lead to some further changes in terms of, well, we don't call it a new world order, at least new blocks, which are going to have a broader impact. So that's one of the trends that we want to show you. We then have this one that we call, we need to regulate AI before it regulates us. And it's the idea, of course, that AI is moving far too fast. And at the moment, we don't have regulation for everything that's going on at the moment. So as much as this development, I mean, always happen with technological innovation, governments are trying to keep up with the regulation. We'll start to see some things which are, well, at least interesting. So the third signal that we have here, it's about a company in Japan, well, essentially giving marriage certificates to over 4,000 people that managed to engage in wedlock with an AI. So that is quite an interesting signal out there, because we don't have regulation for this at the moment, but this company has already been releasing some of these certificates. Also understanding that some people are concerned in terms of how criminal defense lawyers have in the Netherlands, in this particular case, and this is the signal in the middle, have been managed to hack into encrypted communications, well, to essentially to present their cases in court. But obviously there is a backlash in terms of how is this violating human rights. We don't really know how to go about these things yet, but it's obviously quite problematic. And the third signal there is about selling digital fingerprints in the black market. The moment that this data is leaked into the black market is obviously very problematic for all of us, because there's no way that we can detach ourselves from our biometric information. So this is obviously going to pose a problem moving forward. We go to the next theme. Thank you, Darah. Here we have managing financing the green transitions with no money. Something that has been very problematic, as you all know, are or perhaps the main bottleneck in terms of reaching net zero is the transitioning from a fossil fuel economy or energy to more sustainable sources. And at the moment, we know that many of these new endeavors are lacking the proper financing, or the fuels are still heavily subsidized. So we have a few signals which are interesting in this regard. The first one is about New Zealand's and to tax animal emissions to fight climate change. It's not necessarily that closely related to energy itself, but also it's a problem in terms of how we finance the emissions of cattle, in particular. In both, I'm assuming in New Zealand, perhaps it's around sheep. The second one is about the UAE, how they facilitated over $9 billion in sustainable projects in 2022. This is interesting to see how fossil fuel heavily reliant economies are still moving towards this, and that they might have they might even perhaps be better positioned to do this transition, to fund this transition. But on the other hand, we have some backlash. So the third signal in here, which is about anti-ESG bills, and how we see certain power groups perhaps pushing back, not only from financial organizations, but also in this particular case within the US Congress, in terms of the disillusionment around some of the ESG regulation at the moment. If we move on, we have another trend about big tech that we call the good, the bad, and the ugly. And is understanding that obviously big tech is massively changing our society. But at the moment, we wonder if they are somehow gaining too much power in terms of the regulation, how we go about regulating these very large corporations. So the first signal here is about Elon Musk offering satellite internet to Iran and to lift the sanctions against Iran. So this push in terms of how a private organization perhaps at times goes over some of the sanctions imposed to specific countries, and how do we go about this, or what is the effect of this in the global scenario. The second signal that we have here is about business leaders in South Africa, which are actually organizing to fix public sector failures. This is interesting because we see how perhaps in this case, local organizations, we have certain level of power, can put themselves forward to fix some of the issues that they see government not being able to address. That is interesting. It obviously has to do with the power relations between public organizations and private. And the last thing here is about Twitter retaliating against a speech watchdog. It's also interesting. This particular is about the pandemic and the handling of the pandemic and hate discourse, hate speech in the global sphere, particularly about around Twitter, and how they are fighting back. That this is something that we're probably gonna see more and more in the next decade. So it's interesting to see how governments are going to be regulating what's happening in the local spheres when it comes to social media platforms. And our last trend is about what we call silent no more, collective and creative activism, understanding that even though we might have nowadays very restrictive regulation norms around how to demonstrate or how to exert activism, we see that the masses essentially refuse to stay silent, and they show very interesting creative ways of doing their activism, especially around this digital civic space. So we have three things here that we want to share with you. One is about young people attending pro-Palestinian protests in Roblox, something that is really interesting, going to platforms which are not necessarily designed for these sort of activities, but people taking over them to express themselves. The second signal here is about BTS, the K-pop band, or specifically their fans organizing against a coal company to protect a beach, and it's a particular beach where BTS filmed one of their videos. So it's interesting to see how there's a certain perhaps sense of belonging when it came to this one, because it related to one of the bands that they like, and they managed to organize to protest against their installation of this coal factory, this coal facilities. And the last one is about Amazon headquarters construction being halted in South Africa as it is being built in sacred grounds, and native society and organizations there actually pushing to hold this because they feel that it doesn't make any sense to have Amazon headquarters being installed in sacred land. So these are just some of the things that we want to share with you today, but we would like to hear more from you in a second. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Federico and Suha, and I'm really glad also to see the chat quite active. And before I go on to the next part, I wanted to respond to Robert's question about what were the decision factors that led to the identification of these 9 emerging issues. So Robert, again, as I mentioned, this is really not a perfect science, right? These are there were 300 signals of change that were identified by Suha and Federico that were related to governance. And the two of them basically looked at them from their own lens and tried to make sense of them. And I think that the beauty of futures thinking and futures work is that it really takes, every single person can do it differently, right? So each one of us could have these 300 signals and arrive at different issues, right? And different perspectives. So, I might see the issue on, aging populations and the workforce into an issue related to, the workforce, right? So it's as opposed to an issue around democratic shifts, and I might bring demographic shifts, and I might bring in other signals, right? So it really is a kind of subjective exercise, right? And we present these in a specific way to hopefully start a conversation, which we would do in the breakout group. But it's, again, not a perfect science. They're all also interlinked and also very connected to the trends that Julia presented. And just in terms of terminology, futures terminology, I didn't want to necessarily go into this, but in case it might be helpful, right? We talk about signals and trends in futures work. you know, there are weak signals, there are signals. These are, you know, the small data points, you know, the issue of, you know, a young schoolgirl protesting in front of a European parliament, you know, seeing a collection of signals then leads to a trend, which is, you know, more established, right? So what Julia presented were trends, right, that were established, and what Federico and Soha presented were more, you know, the clusters of signals, right? And we hope that this exercise and the other exercises that we're doing with the communities of practice will help our team kind of come up with new trends that are cross-cutting across the signature solutions. So with that, I hope that responded to the question. We can always come back to it. But in the interest of time, I'm going to go on to the exercise before we go into breakout groups, which is, you know, you heard from Federico and Soha the emerging issues that, you know, they came up with as they made sense of the signals in the system. We would really be curious to hear from you, you know, which of these resonated and resonate in your context, and which did you find novel and surprising? So Ezgi, I don't know if you can copy the Miro board in case there are new colleagues that have just joined in, but we'd ask you to, you know, pick a red circle and just drag it to, oh, sorry, I'm going to just do this to make sure this is into the front. Yeah, so drag it to the red circle to if you find that this issue resonates in your context, and then a blue one if you think it is surprising. So just click and drag the circles. Again, red is if you find that it resonates. Blue is if you find that it is surprising for you. We'll just spend about 5 minutes on this. It's interesting to see that you know, a lot of people are noticing the shift in the aging population.
And Darah, there was a comment on that one actually, the aging population one, where colleagues said that it's perhaps more focused on some regions than on others. So I was thinking the same actually. It may be more demographic changes as such, because in some places it could be the youth bubble, right? In other regions it may be more aging population that requires governance adjustments and so on. So maybe it's not necessarily age or youth or other part. In fact, there could be migration issues, for example, you know, setup of the demography. So yeah, maybe to see that emerging issue a bit broader than just aging.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that in, Julia, correct. A lot of the red circles are being used. I think a lot of people, Julia, find that the AI, we need to regulate it before it regulates us. And a lot of people find the regulating of women's bodies, dead or alive, surprising. It's surprising and frightening, I think. So again, as I mentioned, this really isn't, a perfect science in terms of how these issues were collected and how we came up with them. And we really do want to hear from you what your thoughts are. We want you, early on, I did mention disagreements are good, right? So we want you to come in and challenge us if this does not resonate in your context, or if you find that it's something that might not at all, or you might see something contradicting. So with that, I think we're going to move on to the breakout groups, and we'll have about 45 minutes for that. I think this is when we really get to dive deep into some of these emerging issues and get to have conversations around what you think and how does this resonate in your context, and if it's surprising or novel, do you see that this is something that could emerge into a trend in your context, or even globally or regionally. So what we'll do in the breakout groups is we'll have 3 different breakout groups that will discuss 3 issues. So you'll have an opportunity to dive deep into that and share your thoughts, and then we'll have a rapporteur that reports back on the group. But just very quickly, on the instructions, you'll all have a facilitator and someone to help capture the conversations onto Miro. So please, again, don't let Miro frighten you. We'll have people capturing the conversation on the board, but we really want you to dig in and consider some of these questions. What signals in your context do you see that confirm or contradict these issues? How do these emerging issues relate to the trends that the governance team presented? Do they confirm, validate, or contradict them? And then do these indicate any new trends, right? Or you might see completely something else that we're missing, completely. And we really want to hear from you there, because we want to address any blind spots. So again, we're going to have 3 different breakout groups. You'll be assigned to that on Zoom, and you can always, if you're not familiar with Miro but you want to follow, you can go to this the bottom map and go to which group you're assigned to. But we'll have someone sharing the screen and helping you with that. Is there any questions on the breakout groups before we open them up? I will take silence as excitement, and we'll have 45 minutes, and I'll open all the rooms now. Enjoy. Ezgi, you'll have to manually enter the group, yeah? Hello, welcome back, everybody. I think this is all the breakout groups are closed now. I hope you had a rich discussion. I think we did in our group. And apologies. I think there was a glitch in Miro, so if yours stopped working, I think that might be an issue across the board. Just in the interest of time, if what we'll do now is just spend 2 minutes per group to report back. I'll start with group number 1, Sean and Suha.
I had put Marianne on the spot. Marianne, you were just going to say, were you just about to tell me that you didn't want to do it?
Hi, Sean. Hi, everyone. No, I was going to say I need to log off in like 5 minutes, but let me know. So we're supposed to to talk about what we spoke in the group.
I put you on the spot, Marianne, and I don't want to delay. Let me just do a very quick update because I mean colleagues contributed so much, and I don't want to put you on the spot. So yeah, thanks very much, everyone. So the first big signal we looked at was the big tech, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so, you know, acknowledging from the beginning that this is not necessarily new, and this goes back to the governance of digitalization, but what are some of the new signals that we're seeing in tech sector? And so some of the ones that we confirm, which is actually a repeat. Yassine had said that this is something that already happened many years ago in the manufacturing sector, where large businesses were taking over communities, making big decisions, interfering in community development or contributing to community development. And then this is a kind of repeat of that, and this is a confirmed signal that we see as tech companies taking over this role now. Maybe just some unique insights from what might be different in terms of how big tech behaves in maybe bigger or Western countries versus some of the global South countries. And we heard the example of leaders using social media to make decisions and inform the public. Mariana highlighted that in Colombia, actually, it's similarly happening, but actually there's a disconnect there because of the lack of access to some of these platforms. So basically, one percentage of the population gets access to this information, and then another group doesn't. And the best way to connect is usually through WhatsApp. Also, maybe just to say, big tech really failing to regulate effectively, where maybe organized crime is really being driven through their platforms. And we see that maybe is something unique to countries that don't have maybe the same strength of rule of law or criminal regulatory frameworks that can actually regulate that. And so they're not really taking responsibility for this proliferation in crime. I don't have too much time left, but just to say that on the regulating women's bodies one, it kind of, the discussion went beyond regulating women's bodies and how anti-feminist campaigning and movements are being used to put maybe more populist governments or conservative governments in power. And this is a worrying trend, and some unique insights into it, in that, for example, in the Georgian context, that women's private lives are really being used to target them, especially women parliamentarians. Maybe just on the final one, I know I've done much time, but just to say that, yes, this collective activism, absolutely, the signals are there that this is a big resurgence, especially the in-person, and just that there are some signals around maybe how some of these campaigns are continuing, or maybe where they're not as organized or institutionalized, they can't stick together. Some of them tend to fall apart a little bit over time, and the overall scale and effectiveness of them is not maybe what it could be. But again, final point is that there's just really some unique insights into, like, for example, using sporting events or music concerts, and you're seeing some messages like on climate getting mixed in there, and using all these new spaces of people coming together. Sorry for taking too long. Over.
Thanks so much, Sean. Over to Julia and Federico.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to take over for the reporting back. Thank you again to all the participants in our group. We had a very rich conversation. The first comments were around the methodological approach, which I think is a very fair comment to make in terms of understanding how we actually come up with the signals and how the signals are put together and brought into these themes and these trends. So I think we had a bit of conversation around that. But perhaps the most prominent issue discussed was that of leadership, and how perhaps this trend in terms of changing leadership is affecting all other trends that we've seen, that we discussed, and participants were able to understand or to show us how these are trickling down into the others. But especially in terms of the leadership issues are, well, obviously losing trust in leadership, because many parts of the world, they are actually non-representatives of the people that are supposed to be representative, but rather in terms of elites which are there to govern. There's a lack of diversity in leadership, and perhaps that is one of the most interesting lenses to see to which we will see this issue, and some interesting aspects in that is, for instance, it was mentioned BLM, the Black Lives Matter, and how this has changed the world, in particular also how it changed the UN. So we should be looking at that. So some colleagues were mentioning, well, BLM wasn't mentioned once, there was no signals around that. Also, there were no signals or mentions to issues around the economic crisis or the economic governance and the rising cost of living. This apparently wasn't there, which is a fair point to be taken. And there was also a mention in terms of displacement and migration, and how we didn't have any signals about it, which is an interesting point, because we did have actually many signals. We just didn't put those together as such, because we thought that these other things were perhaps different or emerging trends that perhaps people would have, our colleagues would have not seen. So that is why it wasn't there. So this is a comment to everyone. A few more points to be made in terms of governance. Well, again, lack of trust or no trust in leadership is all perhaps the most important way of looking at that. The conflation between corporate leadership and public leadership is also something that was brought up. So obviously issues around representation, and how in many parts of the world there is a bit of an issue around decision making, because often the decisions, government decisions, are pushed back to the incumbent parties and are not necessarily being taken by elected officials. So that is something that it was also raised. And related to AI, to the rise of AI, it's interesting that we were not really discussing who is regulating AI. We know that many people seem to be scared about how we are using AI, but also we need to understand that governments are collecting to track and trace individuals, and we are massively handing our information, especially one example about how we handle our biometric data at airports. So it's something that we do more or less voluntarily, but we're not really discussing this and what are the implications of handing over this vast amount of data to private organizations and also to governments, which oftentimes are working with these organizations. There are a few more points, but I think we don't really have that much time. Is there anything, Julian, that I missed to mention? Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Federico. Over to the last group, Tanja.
Thank you, Darah, and don't relax, because you and Ezgi may have to chip in. And I am setting a little timer for the 2 minutes. So our group started with some comments about the Arab world, beginning with demography and saying that this sort of elderly population demographic thing does not fit some regions, specifically Arab states, Africa, Latin America. And then the comment was made that although there are already some regions, they are birth rates below replacement rate. And very strongly the point was made, this most certainly will become an issue in the next 20 years. And the point is to make decisions and plan around this now already. Some lovely comments using Nepal and Zimbabwe as examples. And it's a trend, absolutely becomes a lot more complex if you factor in migration and issues mentioning, we didn't have the word per se, but brain drain and issues around labor and the issues arising around if there's shortages of labor in these developing countries. Oops, sorry, I got my timer all wrong. So this massive depopulation, we didn't have a mention of the care economy, which is huge as well, but we did have a fascinating mention of Malawi right now sending workers to Israel during the war, and that there's a backlash around this. So just shifting over to our other topic, which was the sort of the multilateralism and the breakdown in the established world order. This is much more of a priority in the Arab world. Again, a comment from that side, due to the inability to act, given the fact that this Gaza war has now broken out. And then also comments around the future of war and uncertainty around it. You know, what if things do go worse going forward? And not just from a regular traditional complex perspective, but also ecocide and governance around that, because we've seen examples of this already. I have got 3 seconds left, so I am just very, very quickly going to mention, oh my goodness, Darah, I'm undermining myself completely here. Sorry about that. Is mental health issues, and fascinating conversation around that, especially around youth. And I think the conversation around mental health sparked a bit more of a conversation around what are some of the issues that we were missing. And here, this was around role of misinformation, disinformation, people completely clutching out, the Great Resignation, pushback in societies about social contract and how things have gone up to now, and things that we thought were accepted not being there anymore. I'm done.
Great. Thank you so much, Tanja. And sorry to all the groups, I think, to rush through this. I don't think it gave justice to the richness and the depth of the conversation, but really thank you to everyone for your contribution. I think this, just from the boards, it looks very rich. I want to, we're going to close now. We have about 3 minutes, and I want to respect your time, but just in terms of next steps, we will be synthesizing what has emerged from this conversation and come up with a few, key insights, and we'll be sharing with those with you afterwards. And this will all contribute again to the global trends report. But with that, I wanted to offer Julia, if you had any closing remarks, or Alexandra from the governance team, and then I'll hand it over to Ezgi to close.
Thanks, Darah. And just to say that it's incredible how 2 hours fly by. It feels like a long time that we take out of our schedules, but it shows that it's a big task to confront all these issues at the same time. And we were saying in our group, it feels messy, but signal scanning and sense making is messy. So I think we shouldn't despair. I've promised colleagues that you will synthesize some of this, like you just said. And I think it's work in progress. If it's not clear cut, it doesn't mean it's lost. I think it's really sense making, and it's great that so many colleagues were able to join. And that's just the beginning. Thank you.
Likewise, Darah, thank you so much to the wider team for bringing these insights to the broader community, and also to everyone who participated for the rich new ideas for elaboration on the missing points. We are not looking to stop this conversation now. If you have any ideas about how can we dive deeper into some of the issues, some of the trends in a collective discussion, please do reach out to us. Without further ado, back to you, Darah.
Great. Thanks again, everyone. And please, if you're interested in becoming a signal scanner, learning more about this future trends in signal system, please reach out to our team. We offer training on this every once in a while. Julia is one of our champion scanners, so you can also hear from her what her views are about the process. Again, thank you for your time, for your insights, for sharing your honest perspectives and your expertise with us. That's it for right now, and hopefully we'll see you all in another in another situation.
Thank you, Darah.
Thank you, Darah. Bye, everyone.
Ezgi, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.